Hi everyone, welcome to week 8 of Lit 215. Can you guys believe that we are already halfway through the semester? I can't. I feel like the weeks are just flying by me. I hope that this book is a little slower than our others have been. We are going to be spending 4 weeks with internment. So hopefully that'll kind of take a little of the pressure off because I know this time in the semester is just insane. So this week we are going over internment, our second section from page 109 to 192. And then also we'll get a little bit into your reading list assignment due Sunday. So let's go ahead and get started. For assignments this week, we've got reading quiz 8 due Thursday, discussion board 8 due Thursday as well. Don't forget to respond to other classmates and those that have responded to you. And then finally, we have a reading list assignment due Sunday, which I'll go into some details here in a minute after discussing kind of internment for this week. Oh, excuse me. So let's talk about internment. I know in chapters 1 through 8, we're kind of setting the scene for this text and this story about Muslim Americans and how it relates to the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II in the US. And now we're kind of getting into this area of settling into life in Mobius in a way, but also to Aaliyah, Layla, and Sohail kind of planning a rebellion or how they're going to fight what's happening around them. So the biggest question I have is whether their rebellion will be successful and why they're choosing to rebel in the way that they are. So I'll talk in a minute about the White Rose, which was kind of a little bit of an inspiration for Layla and her friends. And I think it's significant that Layla is choosing to resist in a nonviolent literary way. I want you to think about why that is. Does that come from her father's background as a poet, from her own background as a student, from the emphasis of Islam on nonviolent resistance? Then kind of ask yourself how that ties into the story of the White Rose. Also, we see in these chapters that David, helped by Corporal Reynolds, is sneaking in and out of the internment camp. And I'm curious to see if we feel like David is trying to help Layla, if he's trying to help his father, or maybe appease his father by encouraging Layla to sort of resist in a certain way, or is he trying to do both? I'm kind of interested to see where that goes. We do notice in these chapters that there is a lot of diversity among the Muslim groups that have been brought and imprisoned in the camp. And Layla at one point says that, she says, her parents always told me never to judge another Muslim's religiosity. She goes on to say the Quran says, let there be no compulsion in religion. And I thought this was important to point out because I think that when we discuss major religions in particular, we tend to assume that all Muslims should act a certain way or practice their religion in a certain way, when that's just not true. And when we think of maybe Christianity, on the other hand, we do recognize that there are different denominations of Christianity, that there are these underlying kind of core tenets, but that what it means to be Christian can change. And I think that we tend to stereotype Islam in a certain way. And you may disagree with that. I'm so interested to see how we talk about this in our discussion board. But I think it's important to recognize that not all Muslims will practice in the same way or act the certain way or believe the same thing, although they do have some cultural commonalities. There is definitely a developed sense of normality at Mobius, and this is coming from not only the director and the guards, but also the Muslims imprisoned there as well. There's this, particularly Layla's parents, are trying to create some kind of routine and, through the garden, community planning, having jobs, organizing a school, participating in prayer time together. And Layla obviously doesn't really feel that this should be happening because she's so caught up in the idea that this isn't normal, that she shouldn't, that agreeing to that normality is somehow giving up. And there definitely is this sort of tension between those two. Corporal Reynolds, we see, is helping David sneak in and out, and he's helping Layla a lot. The director actually at one point in this section notices this help and There's definitely a sense of, oh no. And I tend to think that Corporal Reynolds is a quote unquote good guy, and maybe his intentions are honorable, and maybe he really is trying to help Layla and help the situation in the way that he can without getting caught. But I'm interested to find out what his end goal is. And will he and his character break my heart when something bad happens? I'm unsure. There is, we'll notice in this section particularly, a lack of news inside the camp, and this is intentional. The camp itself obviously is being controlled physically, but also mentally, and this is significant because, as this kind of quote says, he who controls the media controls the minds of the public. And I want us to kind of think about, when you're only receiving one type of information, how can that impact the way that you act or the way that you react? And this may remind you of other stories like 1984 or Fahrenheit 451, or even some of the controversy that we have in the US in recent years about quote unquote fake news and how the media is manipulated or viewed to be manipulative. And so this might be something we discuss in our discussion board as well, the idea that the media and information and news is so important to how we live. And when we feel that that's being manipulated, it can impact a lot of other decisions. And on that same kind of vein, Layla at one point says, lies are a part of life in Mobius. It's how we survive. And I'm interested to hear your all's feelings about that. Is it necessary to lie to survive? And I think Layla and her parents probably believe in a lot of the power of truth. And at what point is it worth dying for? Additionally, at some point, Corporal Reynolds says inshallah to Layla, and Aaliyah, Layla, and Sohail also discuss the significance of that. And inshallah is a greeting. It's also a umbrella term in Arabic. It literally translates to God willing, but just like a lot of the words that we use in English, inshallah can change based on the context it's used in. So it's a really significant phrase for Muslim Americans and Muslims in general. So I would like you all to kind of think about that term, maybe look some stuff up about it if you're not really sure how it's used, and ask yourself, why is it significant for Corporal Reynolds to be using that? Is this a olive branch? Is this a sign of trust? Is it a warning? That kind of thing. And then we do see at the end of this section several members of the camp forcefully removed, and also discussion of people disappearing. So I'm interested to hear what you all think about that. Why would certain members be disappearing, particularly if they're following the rules in the camp? Why might they be removed? What is the director's sort of goal with that? We do see the director a little closer in this section. He's not a kind man, and I think is kind of symbolic of how Samira Ahmed views authority and power in the US. And so we might also reflect on that a little bit. Kind of ask yourself, how can we not generalize the story out, but where might the inspiration for some of these characters be coming from? All right, so in this section, we do hear notice of a group called the White Rose. This was a youth group of students that formed an anti-Nazi group against the Nazi government in Germany in 1942. They advocated nonviolent resistance, and sort of incorporated not just German literature references, but also Christian ideals into leaflets that they secretly distributed across Munich. So they published their leaflets under the name The White Rose, which is significant. There's a lot of symbolism in a white rose. It's a sign of purity, of truth, of not necessarily love. That's more the red rose, but white roses are seen to be also a symbol of resistance and sort of beauty in struggle. So that name is very symbolic. There's a quote I found from the Britannica Encyclopedia that says, one of the leaflets read, "Do not forget that every nation deserves the government that it endures." So essentially commenting on the idea that Germany and Germans who are silent against the Nazi regime deserve what happens next. This is something that Layla also sort of comments on in Internment. So I am curious to see how you all kind of connect the story of the White Rose and this group to Layla and others in the camp. Why would this be the type of resistance that they are drawn to? Excuse me. Ooh. And in what ways are they kind of channeling this same energy? How might the young people in the camp be using their Muslim background and their own knowledge of literature to put forth something powerful? So we will hopefully read Layla's words soon. Other readings for this week include a poem by Samira Ahmed, the author of Internment. It's called Are You the Good Kind of Muslim? It's very good, kind of reflective of the ways that we stereotype Muslims and how that can have real consequences. And then also a TED Talk by a student who discusses the, again, stereotypes of Muslims in America and how that came to be. I think these are two also very important pieces that can kind of inform our reading of Internment. So I do ask that you all continue with these as the week progresses. So last but not least, we do have one major assignment this week. It is a reading list. So this is going to be typed in MLA format, about 3 to 4 pages, I would say. You're going to gather 5 sources, so 5 readings. 3 of them need to be literary pieces. So that can be a novel, it can be a song, it can be a poem, it can be an article, it can be a story, but 3 of them have to be some piece of multicultural literature. I am firm on that. For each source, you want to give an MLA citation, summarize the source you've chosen, and then explain how it's going to help you answer your driving question. So I do encourage everyone, please, please, please read the student example, read the assignment sheet, and look over these resources so that you know exactly what I'm looking for. The student example received a very high grade the last time I taught this class, so I would use that for an understanding of what your reading list should look like and also sound like. If you are struggling finding resources, please reach out to me. I'm happy to help. The SWIC librarians are also incredible. So if you are on campus for a class or need help, their contact information I will link in our folder for this week as well. So if you just give them a call and say, hey, I'm looking for this type of resource, can you help me find it? They absolutely will. All right, so use your resources around you, and then if all else fails, shoot me an email. All right, so I will talk to you guys soon.